Okay, so I had previously recorded a song called Maximillian Domaschko. And the moment that I recorded that song, and I only recorded it once, I only said it once, and I think with practice it could actually be a pretty decent song. But at the time, I was letting a guy, Curtis Stewart, in my house. It was a friend of a friend. Only one person in the world had known where I was at, and he let him in. And for people to try to tell me that there aren't a bunch of assholes out here that want to exploit you, to push you, to manipulate you, that's just a total bunch of bullshit, okay? So that's why people want to come and challenge me. That's all you've ever done is challenge me. You know what you haven't done? You haven't validated me. You haven't said, you know what? Yeah, I got your back. You're my boy. And so I recorded that about like 2 in the morning, and I had wrote it, and essentially I was giving that guy, you know, a sort of watch out, watch out. If you try to do some shit, then I'm going to stand up for myself. And it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I'd parked down the road thinking he was going to rob me when my vehicle was down the road, but I had to hurry up and get a TB shot for Spalding University. Do as the fuck as Spalding says, and then I did what the fuck Spalding says, go get my TB shot, and then my entire house is broken into. Did they give a shit? Of course they don't. They're teachers. Teachers don't care about your life. Shut the fuck up, sit down, and do as they command you in that fucking room. They're not democratic. They're not for let's all succeed and do well. Shut the fuck up and listen to me. I'm the dictator. You're the bitch, and that's just how it is. And then eventually, by being a bitch for such a long time, that you'll eventually be the fucking queen. That makes no sense. It's like explaining to slaves on a plantation. If they just pick their cotton a little bit harder and a little bit faster, one day they'll get to be the master. They will never get to be the master. Never in their entire lives would they get to be the master. The only way you could fight against oppression was to do it the way Lincoln did it. You know, the 3 holy wars that Howard Zinn talks about, World War II, Civil War, American Revolution. I can poke holes with World War II. I can poke holes in it's not a revolutionary war, it's a war for independence, but it left a lot of people behind. So the only war that I think is absolutely 100% just, because it eventually freed the slaves, yeah, Lincoln said some racist shit, yeah, he wanted the Union preserved, that's all he really gave a damn about, but ultimately, the slaves, when they were free, that's probably the most beautiful part of the war, was when the Union armies put guns into the black folks' hands and said, win your own freedom. And they did. And they got their freedom. And they got it like that. And so that's what you do when it comes to oppression. You have to stand up for yourselves. You cannot pick, a shit ton of cotton on a plantation and think that one day you'll be the master. The master has been bred the entire time that they're better than you, that they're superior to you, and that you have to whip the shit out of them. You have to use violence in order to get the slaves in place. You have to use violence and oppression, and they're unapologetic about it, and that's the shit that they've been learning. So that's, you want to be the master, that's what you would have to do, right? You'd have to come out of those sort of intellectual circles, be on the top tier, the echelon. And people need to be honest, and people need to have your back, and they need to tell you exactly what the hell is going on. So yeah, these damn gnats, man, they're pissing me off. But none of this has anything to do with what I'm about to try to... I want to mention some things about Maximillian Domaschko, okay? So, on the 1910 U.S. Census, Max Domaschko called himself an Austrian, okay? He called himself an Austrian even though he wasn't an Austrian. But the Austrian Empire kept on getting bigger and smaller, and it's actually complicated. When you get into the European affairs, I mean, the United States, it seems like we've already, once the Native Americans were wiped out, that's even a good thing, which, it's not. What I'm saying is that room was made, the state lines were drawn, and for the end of time, Kentucky will be here. Kentucky, Tennessee, all the U.S. states, they will be here. We're democratic, so the social, liberal, democratic, sort of perspective, that's going to win over. That's taken over the world. And that's why Francis Fukuyama was kind of like, he was real sad about the end of history. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about the European affairs, even though it's complicated. So in 1910, Maximillian Domaschko called himself an Austrian. In 1920, U.S. Census, Maximillian Domaschko called himself a Bohemian, which is different. He said he was a Bohemian, and he said he spoke Bohemian, in addition to his English. Maximillian Domaschko also said that his parents were Bohemians, and that they also spoke Bohemian. Maximillian Domaschko also referred to himself as a Bohemian in the 1940 U.S. Census. So what changed? What changed from 1910 to 1920? Why does he call himself an Austrian, one decade, and then he started calling himself Bohemian all the subsequent decades after that? And on that same 1940 U.S. Census, Maria Waginger Domaschko said she was born in Germany. And she looks like a bitch. She looks like such a major bitch. Maximillian Domaschko seems like he's just fun-loving. Seems like he's relaxed. She's a bitch. Okay, so I'm getting off track here a little bit. So let's just power through this. So Bohemia makes up the largest region in the Czech Republic. So on the 1917 Naturalization petition, Maria Waginger was listed as being born in Leoprechtag, Bavaria. And Bohemia and Bavaria are bordering each other. The region of Bohemia still exists today in the Czech Republic. But beforehand, it was actually the heart of Europa. It's where the Holy Roman Empire, it's where the Habsburgs, they controlled. So Bohemia is sort of its own region. It was the Sudetenlands that Hitler tried to take over, that Hitler did take over, and that would be Bohemia. And he also took over Austria. And he said that Austria used to be German Austria. And after World War I, it was banned from ever being called German Austria ever again. Or maybe it was two. But either way, it was banned. You cannot call Austria German Austria. And Austria has a crazy-ass history. For some reason, Austria sounds like it's more romantic, but I don't know why. Prague is romantic. The Czech Republic is romantic. Bavaria is romantic. Bavaria is its own country for a long-ass time until eventually gets consolidated in the Federal Republic of modern-day Germany. And so Bavaria is a nation-state inside a nation-state, sort of like Kentucky is inside the United States. So you would be a Bavarian German versus a Kentuckian American. So since Bohemia and Bavaria border each other, it's easy to see how Maria Waginger and Maximilian Domaschko would eventually get to meet one another, right? I think they get married in Vienna. Even if they didn't get married in Vienna, they had children in Vienna. That Marianne Domaschko, which would be my great-grandmother, Frank Domaschko, Anna Domaschko, and Joseph Domaschko were all born in Vienna, Austria. And Austria is like right there, just south of them. So you have Bavaria, and it's Leoprechtag. It's very specific. So if you want to find out, specifically about Maria Waginger, get some primary source documents, go to Leoprechtag, Bavaria. And Leoprechtag, Bavaria is where you will find the documents for Wagingers and John Waginger and Anna Holler and whatever the fuck, her ancestry is. For some reason on Ancestry.com, people are making the mother a secret. Let's be free with our information, okay? I'm sure people are going to be leering at my stuff and taking my stuff. I would like to, to build a relationship with some of my ancestors. If anybody is... Fuck, I've been asking for a goddamn family my entire fucking life. At this point, I'm not even asking anymore. So, it's there. All you gotta do is just reach out and say hi if you're not a piece of shit. But you probably are, and so you won't. So, I'm not gonna get my hopes up anymore. Bohemia, Bavaria is right next to each other. He specifically says on that same naturalization petition that he was born in Hohenfurt. So she was born specifically in Leoprechtag, Bavaria. So Bavaria, that's where you would go. And he said he was born in Hohenfurt. And Hohenfurt today is Vysebrod, Vyssibrod. It's a city in the Czech Republic. So therefore, he's not Bohemian, he's not Austrian. He called himself a Bohemian, but that would be a Czech today. He is ethnically a Czech. He called himself a Bohemian, so that's something. He's not German. but he's Bohemian, and then there's even a movement today in the Czech Republic to try to pick up some of that original Bohemian language, that original Czech language. But Visi Brod, that's a weird-ass looking word, and all the Czech words look weird, but that would have been normal for Maximilian Domaschko. But he also probably knew German, too. I mean, there's a lot of crossovers, right? The Johann and Catherine groups over, they spoke Platzdeutsch, which was lower German, but it was a different kind of German. Platzdeutsch is actually looked down as the shitty, the working classes. They eventually wrote a dictionary and said, okay, this is what our modern German, it all comes from these words, but there's still people that speak Platzdeutsch. There's like rappers that are, rapping in Platzdeutsch, Deutsch, right? So, in July 7th, 1906, Maximilian Domaschko and Maria Waginger, along with their 4 kids, Marianne, Frank, Anna, and Joseph, born 1896, 1898, 1900, and 1906, all in Vienna, come along the board of Hanover, and they set sail from the port of Bremen, and they arrived in the port of Baltimore on July 7th, 1906. Who is leading Austria then? That would be Franz Joseph. And so I want to try to get this into a historical perspective, because this is, these are historical sort of immigration things that are happening right now. Especially when you compare it to Johann and Anna Katharina and their kids. I don't see any naturalization papers for them. So it's like they got here early enough and they're able to slip in under the radar. They didn't have a visa, they didn't have permission, and they didn't get naturalized. So at no point were they actually, had to take a test to learn the Constitution and to become Americans. That didn't happen. That happened eventually later on, and that's what Maximilian Domaschko and his family is having to go through. So, in fact, I would even wager that immigrants who could pass the naturalization exam know more about America and their laws and its ideals than Americans do, especially ones that come out of these shitty-ass public schools, especially Kentucky, especially in Chancellor, Julie Chancellor's, Southern fucking Heights, Louisville, Southern whatever. She don't teach them shit about democracy. Teachers are fascist. Teachers are fascist too. Okay, so Marianne Domaschko, she would eventually marry George Anthony Gripshover, who would then birth Teresa Gripshover, my grandmother. Okay, so that's my grandmother is Teresa Gripshover, which would make Marianne Domaschko and George Anthony Gripshover my great-grandparents. And then that would make Maximilian Domaschko and Maria Waginger my great-great-grandparents. So Maximilian Domaschko is my double-great-grandpa. And Maria Waginger would be my double-great-grandma. And I have put more attention on the Gripshover coming over to America than I had the Domaschkos. I haven't looked at the Bills and the Hellmans too much either. But they're all equally valid. They all have the equal percentage of blood, depending on how far you go up the tree that's coursing through my veins. So George Anthony Gripshover would eventually fight in World War I, and this is the era that we're talking about, 1906. 1906, Franz Joseph actually had a brother, Maximillian, who came to Mexico and tried to take over Mexico, and he called himself the Emperor of Mexico, and then eventually the Mexicans fought Maximillian. The same name, Maximillian. I wonder if that's where he got his name from. Franz Joseph was the king, the monarch, the emperor of Austria-Hungary, or they changed their fucking name so many times. But Franz Joseph was the emperor for about 50 to 60 years. And then in 1867, they created the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. I got a video link, so if you want to see the rise and fall of both Prussia and Austria, they're both fascinating videos. But you can check them out, below this video. I'll put this in, my blog. But you have, it looks like that the group servers just kind of blended in. They just assumed they're Americans, and then eventually they became so. But when it came to the Domaschkos, they had to actually go through the hoops. They actually had to do, the things that Donald Trump is saying everyone else had to do. But my group server ancestors, I haven't found any evidence that they had to do that. So I'm not for sure why, Max and Maria Domaschko immigrated to America. I don't know why Vienna was so bad and why Erlanger was so good. What pushed them out? What pulled them here? July 7th, 1906. I know the date, and the date is telling somewhat. But without going too far into 1906, I want to get to the petition for naturalization. So he applies for a petition, applies to become a United States citizen almost immediately, and then eventually he doesn't get called up to turn his petition until 1917, which would be the same year that America enters into the World War I. And so, World War I, which George Anthony Gripshover fought in, lasted from July 28th of 1914. Lasted from July 28th, 1914 to November 11th, 1918 for the European countries. It was about 4.5 years long, but the United States Congress would declare war on Germany in April 6, 1917. April 6th. It was February 17th, 1917 that he got his naturalization papers passed. And so that's a month and a half later. So, therefore, he became a U.S. citizen. A month and a half later, we declare war on Germany in 1917. But America's involvement was only the last year and a half of World War II. For 4.5 years, the Europeans have been killing each other. And it all started with the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This is the Archduke of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. This would be the place where the Domaschkos came from. So Franz Joseph, he had a brother named Maximillian who eventually gets killed because he tried to take over Mexico. Then he had a brother, somebody got suicide or killed himself. And then his wife got assassinated. His wife got just murdered by some, pissed off guy. And so he's had his fair share of tragedies, but he was also the emperor for 60 fucking years. And the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand is what precipitates and starts World War I. The assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, this would be the heir presumptive. So when Franz Joseph died, it was going to be Franz Ferdinand. So it's the vice president, the next in line. And that's a lot of times that's why people's legacies don't carry on, because they didn't have good successive policies. Who will take over when, Franz Joseph eventually dies and he was an old man? So Franz Ferdinand is assassinated, and then that's Austrian-Hungarian tried to in Sarajevo by Gavril Princip, and he's assassinated, and then Austrian-Hungarians blame all of Serbia, and they give them an ultimatum, and Serbia basically agreed to like 9/10 of all the points. They just didn't want the Austrian-Hungarians to come in and, investigate who Gavril Princip was and to get in their business and shit. And since Serbia didn't agree to the ultimatum, and Austrian-Hungarians pushed, this is Franz Joseph, so I don't know why we say Austria. Really, it's Franz Joseph regime. And Franz Joseph lost Germany. I mean, he lost Germany to Prussia. There was a lesser Germany and a greater Germany argument. He was for greater Germany, for Austria to be in it, and it didn't work. So what? So my point was that Franz Ferdinand was the next in line for Franz Joseph. Franz Joseph didn't actually get into it, and it's now Karl the first Emperor of Austria and the Apostolic King of Hungary. This is the person that Maximillian Domaschko had to renounce when he became a citizen in 1917. So he hailed from Austria, Vienna, Hohenfurt, right in that area where King Franz Joseph, and Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and eventually Karl would rule. They would rule over their lands. They're a royal family. They've been conquering people for a long-ass time. They're the Habsburgs, and just because they conquered people, 100 or 500 years ago, they want to keep on having the same power because of their right to birth or what have you. So, 1.5 months before the U.S. declared war on Germany, Maximillian Domaschko's family become legal Americans. We got into the World War I. World War I, people did not come from World War I happy. They did not come from World War I thinking they did a good job. World War II, people was like, yeah, we defeated Hitler and Nazism. But World War I was trench warfare. People were fighting by inches. There was all this poison gas. And, you know, they don't know what the fuck it was. What the fuck were we there for? Why did we go there? It didn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense, even if you look at the specifics. I think, personally, Germany was looking to be a strong power, and Woodrow Wilson wanted to be the empire, so he conquered Germany because they were strong. And they were strong industrially, they were strong when they united, so it was this empire that was this nation-state that could eventually rival the U.S., and that's what World War II, that represented the cultural peak of Western civilization. And what did we do when we had all this technology? We turned it against each other, and we killed a shit ton of people. So World War I, I'm not very happy with. In fact, Eugene Debs speaks out against it, and he gets a 10-year prison sentence, so great job for free speech on that front. But Woodrow Wilson also starts a campaign against German-Americanism, and that's why my ancestors, that's why we don't know who we actually are. We don't know where we came from. We don't know what we're about. We had to adopt this fucking Protestant, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant fucking culture. And, you know, it's like you have to delete who you are, but they know who they are, but we delete who we are. And then Anglo-Saxon, that's German, so they start out Germans anyways. So, on February 17th, 1917, Maximillian Domaschko, he's got his naturalization petition. His wife and his children are now U.S. citizens. He renounces his allegiance to the man who is ruling over the lands, Karl I, Emperor of Austria and Apostolic King of Hungary. This is 10 months after Max and family become U.S. citizens. The U.S. then declares war on Austrian-Hungarian Empire, December 7th, 1917. So in April of 1917, we declared war against Germany, and because Austrian-Hungarian Empire was Germany's allies, we declare war on them. So we declared war on essentially the Gripshovers' homelands and the Domaschko's homelands in World War I. So I just want to make a note about the Karl Emperor. That was the whole point of this, so I'm going to get through this real fucking fast. He was born Kaiser Karl, bless Charles, whatever, Karl I. He was born Karl Franz Joseph Ludwig Hubert George Otto Maria von Habsburg's Lotharingen. So he's got 10 names when he was born, right? He's a royal fucking, you know, going to be Archduke or some shit. He was born to an Archduke, so he's Imperial Royal Highness. And it was his granduncle, so it was his grandnephew that eventually takes over the kingdom. But that's what he was born with, 10 fucking names. Karl I was a pussy. He was weak. He got in there. He didn't know what the hell was going on. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand had been, you know, prepped and polished, and he knew what was going on. This Karl didn't know what the hell was going on. Eventually, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire is going to be wiped out. And I think it's a good thing, because fuck empires and fuck royal families, fuck monarchy. They were not for democracy. They were for totalitarian fascist rule. And fuck a totalitarian fascist. Fuck a totalitarian fascist. Do as I say, or there will be violence. That's a fascist. And there are fascists. Cops are fascist. Teachers are fascist. Abusive parents are fascist. So he was this Karl guy. He's going to be an empire. He's going to be an emperor. He's a royal family. They don't believe in democracy. They want to conquer Serbia. Serbia didn't want that, and then Germany kind of pushed them to do it. Russia sides with Serbia. France sides with Serbia. Britain declares war on Germany just because fuck them. They're a strong kingdom, and they need to conquer them. And then Woodrow Wilson gets into it because of empire. He invaded Haiti. He invaded Mexico at Veracruz. He occupied Haiti for a decade or two. He was an imperialist. He was also racist, a piece of shit. Fuck Woodrow Wilson. Fuck Woodrow Wilson. Don't get me started on Woodrow Wilson. But essentially because the destruction of the German culture is I feel very much that he took something away from me. So, let's see. He was born with all the names. Then the assassination made him come up, even though he wasn't ready. Charles would eventually die at the age of 34. He said he didn't abdicate, but he did abdicate. He walks away. He was trying to negotiate terms of surrender and peace, and it all fell apart. And then eventually they said, well, he's been trying to, you know, start a peace with us, And then he was like, nuh-uh, and then they published his letters, which had his signatures on them, so they kind of fucked him over a little bit there. And you know, he was booted out, and then the Austrian-Hungarian Empire was no more. The end of World War I, there was no more Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Austria was able to retain something. They're still a nation-state today. Hungary is still a nation-state today. But the empire that was under these, you know, that also ended the Habsburgs monarchy, or their sort of dynasty. And then that was it. You know, so essentially the assassination of his relative precipitated World War I. He rises up. Maximillian Domaschko denounces Karl I, and Charles is going to die at the age of 34 while in impoverished exile on the Portuguese island of Madeira. He renounced the administrative governmental duties, but he still retained the throne. He's a royal fucking prince. He's still king. No matter what you say, he's still king. God damn it. And so, even though he was exiled, he still talked about restoring the monarchy, but eventually one day he was sick. He went out for a walk in the cold, and he got pneumonia, and he died in 1922. So that was just right after World War II, 4 years after World War I was over, he dies. So, Franz Joseph died in 1916. So, essentially, when Franz Joseph died, and then that's when we're like, oh my God, they're weak, you know, they're in turmoil. Austrian-Hungarian, the United States did, the government, Woodrow Wilson, and so then he declares war on Germany in April, and then he declares war on Austria in December. And so, I mean, attacking the German, you know, and the Austrians, and so I bet they did probably view them with suspicion, like, are you sure do you renounce Karl I? And the way he wrote it, too, because it just seemed like Karl I, Emperor of Austria and Apostolic King of Hungary. The Apostolic? That's fucking Catholic shit right there. The Apostolic, the King. So is he actually the King or the Apostolic King? You know? And what the fuck is Apostolic? Like, get the fuck out of here. That's probably why the Roman Empire went down, was because of Christianity. It's also the reason why Austrian-Hungarian Empire went down. The Catholics wanted to control Karl so damn much, they made him into a weak little pussy that they could push around, and then he wasn't strong enough to hold his own empire. So he wasn't a strong enough prince. And who remembers a prince who loses his land? Nobody does. And so that's why we don't talk about Karl I today. But I just thought it was interesting that he wrote specifically Karl I, Emperor. That's who he denounced. No, I have no allegiance to him, and I won't ever kiss his ass. I won't ever go back to his ways. Fuck Karl. You know, you want to become an American? Well, first you need to say fuck Karl. Fuck the Emperor Karl. Okay. Fuck the Emperor Karl. All right, Maximillian Domaschko. Okay, Maria Waginger and your 7 kids. Now you're Americans. So that's I got through it. Okay, good. Whew. I don't know how much longer this is. I got 10 more minutes. Someone filled up with talking about something. So yeah, my yelling for Maximillian Domaschko is basically yelling for my ancestors, yelling for my family, yelling for somebody to give a flying fuck. Give a flying fuck. Jesus Christ. I saw a little bird, and I had started a fire, and it went up, and the little bird was crawling around, and I could have just took the bird and threw it off to the side into a ditch, but it would have made a mockery of my conscience, and I couldn't do that. And so instead of doing that, what I did was I took care of it for that night, and then I put it in the tree, and the mother came and picked it up. So I got it back to its mother, but I chose life. If I didn't choose life, and it was a pain in the ass, you know, I didn't want to take care of another fucking animal. I'm barely taking care of myself. But I plowed through it. Life, it mattered. I felt good about because I think it would eventually die because it wasn't eating anything. Every time I would give it food, it would close its mouth. But it would see my finger and open its mouth. And it's like, no, you don't know what's going on, you stupid baby. And but eventually the bird came back. So I feel like I understand a lot of things just by that. When you choose life, it's going to bring, you know, a baby is a tyrannical little monster, right? It shits, it cries, and you have to take care of it and listen to its every need. But that's how you make sure it lives. So there's unconditional love and then there's conditional love. And I think you need both. You need a combination of the two. So I think that life is a choice. And the fact that, you know, it's one thing that people didn't reach out in my time in need, but where the fuck has any of my family ever been? The people that understood their German culture and their German language are the ones that stuck together. And I have a feeling that Domaschkos know themselves a lot better than the Gripshovers do. At least my sect, the Teresa and Camillus Gripshovers. So the Domaschkos, they've been having a reunion. I think they know themselves a little bit better. And that's probably why they have a close family. But, yeah, so Empress Elizabeth of Austria, she was a